Hello everybody, this is Mike with another video, this one aimed at the players of my Pathfinder 1st Edition game. I wanted to introduce a few homebrew and I guess skill clarifications, just so you'll know how some things work in my game. You know what to expect, you know what to plan for. As usual, whenever I change the rules, I'll give you the option to make changes to your character if you need to. I don't think this will be very long, but as usual, I'm not working from a script, so let's just dive right into this. If you ever played my old Dorks and Dice homebrew role-playing game, you might recall that it had a really long list of skills, and it was basically a skill-based game, so everything you could do was based on some particular skill, and I had gotten into a lot of detail and minutia into certain activities that characters could undertake. And while you might think of the skill list that Pathfinder uses as pretty long, and I guess it is, I've wanted to account for a few things that I've missed from my old game. So I've just made a list here of some things. A few of them resulted in me creating some new skills. Most of them are just me indicating that the skill concept in question is covered by an existing skill inside of Pathfinder. So the first one, these are alphabetical. The first one is cosmic awareness, which is actually kind of a big deal, and you'll see it actually links to another document. I'm going to actually make a different video to explain that, so we're going to skip over that for now. The next is the idea of court behavior and politics. This will be covered by your knowledge nobility. So this doesn't supersede what knowledge nobility already does, and that's the case for all of these. I'm not taking anything away from the skills, I'm just adding to them. So you continue to know about royal lineages and heraldry and that kind of thing, but nobility can also work like a version of diplomacy when you're manipulating courtiers or publicly addressing royals or trying to sway political activities and movements and decisions in that kind of a setting. Again, a lot of this might be able to be accomplished with diplomacy or even, I guess, bluff or intimidation or those social skills. And I don't mean to make those not useful, but I like the idea that if you are not a charming person who can come in and use a charisma-based social skill to do these things, you could still leverage your intelligence and your awareness of the political scene within court to forward your goals. So if there's overlap between some skills, that's okay with me. All right. Next skill I've got here is drinking. This was always kind of a big deal in my game because alcoholic beverages in my settings are really potent concoctions. Really, if you don't have at least one rank of drinking, you probably shouldn't ever drink. Certainly not more than a single alcoholic beverage per, scene or evening or whatever. I absolutely will afflict you with some negative condition if you choose to sit down and drink and you're not a practiced drinker. I make a note in here that drinking is a way to impress or endear yourself to certain groups in these kinds of heroic adventurer settings. So if you're good at carousing and partying and winning drinking contests, then you might find some sort of social avenue through your con-based skill, which I think is kind of fun. The skill adds a 1-for-1 bonus to your fort save to recover from a hangover and that sort of thing. So if you make the mistake of drinking Iberian Panther Sweat or something like that, you're going to be making a fort save. But if you're a talented drinker, then you'll probably be all right. Being good at slamming shots also gives you a chance to drink a potion a little faster than the average person because you're good at chugging. So there's rules here for that. And I make a note up here at the top that I don't write out a DC for every single concept that's listed here, but as they come up and I set a DC, I'll add them to this document. In this case, if you want to drink a potion as a move action other than a standard action, it's a DC 20. And if you fail, it uses your standard action. So you have to have a standard action available when you try it. Kind of like the way fast dismount requires you to have a standard action, but if you do it quickly, it turns it into a move action or whatever. Feign death is actually going to use the swim skill. So swimmers are good at holding their breath, and you can leverage that ability to stay calm underwater and to pretend you're dead. Foresight is another new skill. So this is the second new skill, well, third new skill I've introduced: cosmic awareness, drinking, and now foresight. Foresight is sort of perception, but on a psychic level. So I think you might instinctively think this should go with wisdom, but since perception already goes with wisdom, I decided to tie this to your charisma, which I kind of think of as not just your charm and your good looks, but also sort of your willpower, your force of personality. So you can use foresight to predict the future, by using like chicken bones or tarot cards or something like that. So it kind of is your ability to be a real fortune teller, to literally see the future. It can also be used to increase your awareness of your surroundings by opening up to life or unlife forces around you. So you could actually stand watch, when you're traveling through the wilderness, not by patrolling the edge of the camp, but instead sitting like Doctor Strange in the lotus position and, being psychically aware of what's going on around you. You can use foresight to dream walk. And so if you wanted to spy on the minds of sleeping individuals, or to deliver messages, or to do an Inception-like deal where you kind of plant an idea in somebody's head, you can use foresight for that as well. But as I note here, beware of entering the dreams of a hostile and talented dream walker, because you can end up in a situation where you're making opposed checks, and I literally, force you to stay asleep forever, or you get trapped in the dream forever, or you go insane or something like that. And again, most conditions can be fixed, but it might take you off the board for some period of time while you brought in a secondary character and your primary went and got his brain straight. It also gives you a chance in a non-combat situation just to sense that there are spirits nearby or something like that. That ends up being probably less, sort of combat useful than sort of narratively useful. I'd let you communicate with a ghost that you sensed and maybe nobody else could see, or something like that. A ghost or a shade or something might be more sympathetic to you than the normal person, because you have this sort of psychic awareness. The concept of gambling is covered by Profession Gambler and Sense Motive, and when you look at the revised downtime rules, you'll see that specifically those two skills can either or both be used to impact how successful you are when you gamble. Identifying languages and deciphering script is part of the linguistics skill. Deciphering script has always been in the core rules. So, that's nothing new. It's just something that was always on my old skill list. So that's what I'm drawing attention to here, is things. I don't know if you've ever sat down and really read the skill list. You probably should, at least for the skills you care about. But deciphering script isn't anything that I'm suddenly introducing to the linguistics skill. I'm just kind of drawing your attention to the fact that it's there. Identify languages, it's sort of implied that you can do that with the linguistic skill, but it's not really defined how you would go about it. So I used my language categories: basic, regional, creature, extraplanar, and secret, and set DCs for how you might, at least, even if you don't understand what somebody's saying, you as a linguist have a pretty good chance of knowing you're listening to Orcish or whatever. If you want to interrogate, bribe, or seduce somebody, I'm going to make that go off the sense motive skill. My thought process here is that those three things have more to do with what that person wants than how charming or scary or deceptive you are. So it has less to do with how your personality and more to do with your ability to understand their personality. I make a note here, and I'm going to talk about several professions as we go through this, and I'll make a point as to why in just a sec. But profession sailor is going to cover my old sea navigation and naval tactics and naval lore. Again, it doesn't supersede what it always did, which is knowing how to pilot a ship. But it's sort of a catch-all skill for basically anything you want to do on the water. And then there's a little bit more description here you can read in your own time. Diplomacy is going to take care of Streetwise, which, there's gather information rules under Streetwise if you go read it, and under Diplomacy. And Streetwise is not much more than gathering information, in my opinion. It's doing it in a way that doesn't offend people and draw attention to yourself and that sort of thing, but I'm okay with that inherently being part of gathering information. So gather information in Streetwise can be synonymous, and gather information is covered in the diplomacy skill. I'm also, there's a whole, you may have seen this on some of the sheets I've already rolled out, but there's a whole concept of your reputation and your leadership ability with the minions and the followers that you have. And I'm going to say that ranks in diplomacy basically go 1-for-1 towards your reputation score. So the more diplomatic you are, the more you're going to be able to lead and impress those beneath you in your, not beneath you in like a social sense, but beneath you in sort of, like your hierarchy of your organization. Philosophy is a new skill. This is stolen right out of Hugh's game, although I'm sure I run it differently than him. Basically, it's your ability to make an educated guess about almost anything. I've got a note in here that I don't expect you to use this for everything. It's meant to be like a backup or a fail-safe when you can't figure out what's going on and all your other avenues, magical and skill-based, have failed. The DCs for anything tied to philosophy are always going to be higher than if you were using an appropriate skill, but it is a chance to get some sort of direction from me about something that has you stumped, or something you think it's really important, or something that basically you couldn't otherwise know. You can also use it to get hints. If I've put one of my goofy puzzles in front of you and you can't figure out what to do and you're getting frustrated. And then it's a way that I can prompt you, if you have the skill, to let me remind you of something that you're clearly forgetting. So that's the memory part of this. I'm going to skip over the player defined line here because it's not as broad as it might sound. It's really just a way of using professions to cover something that maybe is important to you that the skill list doesn't think of, but let's come back to that in a second. Presence, came from the Champions superhero role-playing game, and I always loved it. Being able to make a presence attack when you enter a room or whatever. And intimidation already kind of gives you the ability to target somebody and put them on their heels at a disadvantage. I think you can impose the shaken condition on someone or whatever. But I'm including with intimidation this idea that if you're a relevant person with a high intimidation skill, you have sort of a personal aura of power that you really can't control. Like, this is kind of always on, and you can leverage it to impress people or to get a good table right away at a crowded restaurant or something like that. If somebody looks like they're considering attacking you, your presence might make them think twice about it. And keep in mind, as you raise your intimidation, your presence is going to increase, and you really can't lessen it or dampen it without extra effort. If you have like a disguise or an illusion, it will certainly, muffle your presence, but you're just so awesome if you get your intimidation high enough that people can just sense it. It is not the DM's responsibility, however, to make your presence relevant at all times. It's going to be the responsibility of the player to role play and narrate the scenes where you want your presence to come into play. I might bring it up when you don't want it to come into play. But you need to be comfortable with the role playing that goes along with this and the creativity of how it affects those around you and that kind of thing, because that's going to be your job as a presence filled individual. Public speaking, public speaking and oratory were always skills in my old game. I'm just going to tie them to basic performance. Even if you don't train any ranks of any performance, we'll just use sort of your generic performance skill. So, basically your charisma, if you don't have any points in it, to determine how influential and how much you sway people with your performance. But if you're trained in any performance-based skill, I'm willing to use whatever that is to kind of forward your public speaking as well. I know it doesn't make much sense that if you're good at playing the drums, you'd also be good at public speaking, but I know performance isn't a skill people really want to pump a lot of points into. So I'll give you the benefit of the doubt if you've spent your time training to entertain people. That's a big portion of it. I thought about tying that to sense motive, and I still might change it, to be honest with you. I'd appreciate feedback from you guys because, again, I think public speaking might fall under that umbrella of it has more to do with what the people you're speaking to want to hear than how well you say it. Anyway, something we can debate. Reconnoiter, spy, case joint, read lips. Most of this stuff could be accomplished with a combination of skills like stealth and perception and survival and maybe sense motive and that sort of thing. But I like this idea that you could use a profession, and I call out profession scout and profession spy here. I like the idea that you could use a profession to sort of create a multi-skill, if that makes sense. So this sort of combines the value of stealth and sense motive and perception and survival and whatever, but only in the cases that you're spying on or reconning a discrete place. I'm going into the jewelry shop to see what's going on, or I'm going to go check out the bandit camp or whatever. Then I'd let you use your profession for this. If you're just walking down a hall to get from point A to point B and you don't want to be seen, that's a stealth role. That's not a scout role or a spy role or anything. But I like the idea of you creating sort of a particular job title and then kind of rolling up some different skills underneath it that are situationally useful. I think that sounds fun. So rope use, lasso, and apply oil. Apply oil sounds a little racy, I guess, but you can drink potions and you can apply oil. And I said the drinking skill would let you speed through getting a potion in you, but that doesn't help you spread an oil all over your weapon or whatever. In this case, you can use sleight of hand to do the same thing that the same thing I said about drinking and getting a potion in you fast. You could use sleight of hand to get an oil on a weapon or a person or whatever as a move action rather than a standard action. By the way, neither of those takes away the fact that it still provokes an attack of opportunity. That's still a thing. Also, you can use sleight of hand for rope use. So if you're going to be tying knots, trying to help people, like if you want a bonus to a climbing roll, or if you're using a rope to help everyone get across the river or whatever, then I'm going to give you a bonus if you're good at sleight of hand, because I'm going to assume your ropes has good knots in it. You can also, and this is mostly a non-combat thing, or at least a start combat thing, but you can use your sleight of hand to be good with a lasso. So if you want to, wrap somebody up and slam them against walls or trip them or whatever, then I'll let you do that. With this, of course, they may turn around if they're stronger than you and grab the rope and use it to pull you down. And then lastly, if you have a whip, you can use sleight of hand to use your whip to do tricks like flipping a lever or swinging from a statue or something like that. I think you guys have probably picked up on this because I know we've talked about it before, but Disable Device does all the things that Disable Device says it would do. There's nothing in this document changes that. The reason I have it listed here is because My game includes the concept of setting and removing snares. Basically, if you're doing things like snares and pitfalls and falling rock, tripwires, and that kind of thing in an outdoor setting, then that's going to use the survival skill, not the disable device skill. That actually came into play in San's preparation for the undead attack on the paladins up there in the mountains in the jungle. So that's why I think you guys are probably already familiar with how that works, because San was good at survival and at the time not good at disable device. I think that may have changed. Okay, another new skill, spatial awareness. This includes time sense, direction, and location sense. It's kind of a classic concept in D&D, and I didn't, I guess I could just make it part of perception or whatever. But again, in an effort to make wisdom and perception not the end-all be-all, I've tied this skill to intelligence. And I don't think it needs much direction. You know what spatial, time, direction, and location mean. It's a good way to justify knowing how long your spells are going to last. Like if you cast a spell that lasts in hours on somebody that, maybe you put some sort of charm or suggestion on them or something, and, you don't wear watches, right? So if you want to justify a realistic understanding of when that's going to wear off or whatever, then it's good to have a point or two in this skill so we can all agree that you're aware of things like that. You can use spellcraft to assess a spellcaster. So whether they're an arcane caster or a divine caster or something custom that I've pulled out of my back pocket, which I do a lot for bad guys, you can still use knowledge checks to know what general bad guys are and what they can do. But when typically this is going to be used against some sort of dramatically important or relevant or named individual that you want some sort of head-to-toe evaluation of their gear and their level and their powers kind of all at once, then you can use your your spellcraft skill to assess them. I've got a note here that this is usually done outside of combat, when you see them walk into the tavern or whatever. If you're trying to assess them in combat, then I'm going to increase the DC by 10. That same exact concept can be applied to the profession soldier or profession mercenary skills if you want to assess a martial combatant. So combatant, I don't know what that word is. Anyway, it's the same thing, only not a spellcaster, instead just a guy with a bow or a sword or whatever. Some guy looks unassuming, but he walks with the grace of a trained swordsman. You can use your skill to kind of go, oh yeah, that guy's good. You can also use soldier or mercenary to solicit tactics advice from the DM. I've got a note here about how I might not be smarter than you, and I can't predict the future, and you might roll really badly, but it might be useful to have me point out something that I think you're overlooking, or things that you think are facts that I know are just assumptions. You can use tactics to get me to share that information with you. Otherwise, I will do like I always do and just sit back and watch you figure it out. I've also got military lore wrapped up in this. So this means, a professional soldier or mercenary knows the tools of his trade. So he knows about weapons and armor and siege weapons and how to run a siege and maybe a little bit of military history and that kind of thing. And again, if this overlaps with history a little bit, that doesn't make me upset. The skill torture is just going to be covered by heal. Anybody, as I have written here, can hurt somebody else, so doesn't really require a skill. Torture is the idea that you're going to hurt somebody as much as possible without killing them, usually, in an effort to get them to talk. There's a Pathfinder rule that I completely agree with, that torture is always an evil act, and that's a capital E, evil act. And in the real world, most smart people know that torture is not particularly effective because it tends to get people to talk in an effort to get you to stop hurting them. So they tend to kind of say what they think you want to hear as opposed to the truth. So we've probably spent a lot more time talking about torture than it will ever come up in the game, so I will move on. Concepts of trading and fencing and banking and just how currency works in different places and that kind of thing, I'm just going to let fall under the appraisal skill, which I think needs some love. Note that I don't have haggling in here. You guys probably have picked up on the fact that I'm not a big fan of haggling. There may be occasions where we need to haggle over something, and in those cases I'm fine with you using appraisal, but haggling isn't a thing that you can do every time you go to buy something. Not because your character couldn't do it in reality, but because I don't like dealing with it. And I make a note here that you could also, back to professions, you have a professional skill like trader or banker or fence, and it would cover these same sort of concepts. So I'd be okay with that. I'm going to scroll back up now to this sort of player-defined idea. I wanted to run through my descriptions of profession scout and profession spy and profession soldier and mercenary, and I just mentioned profession, trader or banker or whatever. I've got a note here that if you'll sort of follow the template that I'm kind of creating there, if you have an idea for and I can think of a dozen of them, honestly. If you've got an idea for sort of a niche subject that you want to kind of turn into a multi-skill that's really limited in scope, but makes you a professional expert at a particular subject or group of ideas, then I'm fine with you at least presenting that to me. I bet I'm going to approve it. So just something to keep in mind, because I think professions are cool. I put a little note down here. This is to kind of cover my old skills of area familiarity, culture, and navigation. I put them down here because I thought it might be useful for all of us, especially me, to sort of see this laid out in one place. So if you happen to be going from one place to another, as I write here, this isn't really new information, but if you really want to get from point A to point B through especially the jungle, which is what you're going to be doing in my game most of the time, you're going to want to succeed at 3 different skills. And whether they're in one person's brain or in 3 different people's brains doesn't matter, but failure at any one of these could make the whole trip feel like a failure. So what I used to call area familiarity is going to be covered by the geography, and this is knowledge geography. I need to put that in front of it. I'll edit that later. Knowledge geography covers my old area familiarity, and this is knowing where the rivers and the mountains and the impassable gorges and the good farmland is. It's recognizing that recent storm may have washed out the river or whatever. So it's an awareness of terrain that you can't really get from other skills. What I used to call culture knowledge can be covered by knowledge local, and this is your understanding of who lives in a place you might be going to, how they behave, what they value, their laws. Are you going to be challenged at the city gates? Or are they going to make you surrender your weapons? Is spellcasting illegal? Do they worship a particular deity? And you don't want to display holy symbols of anybody else, that kind of stuff. And it's not my responsibility to tell you these things before you go somewhere. It's your responsibility to ask me for a knowledge local so you can know these things before you go somewhere. And then lastly, literally navigating from one place to another is the survival skill. And it's more, so where geography sort of covers the scope of the whole trip, survival is about the minute-by-minute survival, for lack of a better word, of the dangers you're in your immediate future. So avoiding quicksand and knowing those plants are dangerous and those trees are alive and you can't drink that water and we can't sleep here and that kind of thing goes along with the navigation part of this. So you might navigate well, but fail your area familiarity roll, and find yourself taking a suboptimal path to your destination, or walking up to that impassable gorge and saying, oh yeah, I forgot this was here. While we're on the subject, I'd like to point out that the maps that I provide to you guys, I guess I could pull one of them up here. The maps that I provide to you guys, I may have said this in the past, but I definitely want to reiterate it. So especially sort of my homebrew maps, like this guy right here. Your character may have a map that looks like this. And it's really useful for seeing sort of the relative positions of places and the distances generally between things. But keep in mind that this map is not a 100% accurate representation of the world at large. Things might not be in exactly the places they appear on this map. And more importantly, there are probably tons of things, not probably, there are definitely tons of things out there in the world that aren't on this map. You may get to a particular place and find that it's swampy, and yet nothing on this map led you to know that it was swampy. Or you might think that this cave is between these two rivers in the southern end, but find that this cave is actually between these two rivers in the northern end. So this is in part because it's just realistic that you wouldn't have a perfectly accurate map. And it's also that I make these maps to give you a general idea of the game you're playing. But when I start making the details of a place you might visit, then I might come up with ideas and terrains and obstacles that I think are more fun. And that then makes things like your area familiarity and your navigation skill, call that geography and survival, useful. I think that is really all I wanted to talk about here, other than you're going to see next time you look at your skill tracking sheet that I have added these skills that we just talked about to it. So there's drinking here now, and cosmic awareness, which, like I said, we'll talk about later, philosophy and spatial awareness and so on. They're all on here. I get that you might want to revamp some of this based on what I just said to you. You know, I hope it doesn't result in a total overhaul, but I get it. If you need to, I'm not going to argue with you. One thing I was going to say is I've done a really poor job of making your wises useful. So I give to you, each of you, one skill that is going to increase automatically by 1 every single level. So at 10th level, it will have 10 ranks in it. At 15th level, it will have 15 ranks in it. You may not have any skill that you want to go up by 1 every level, but you're going to get it automatically regardless. So you can leave it like Adeline has her party till dawn, and Craze has his time-wise, Lily has her raptor-wise, Son has ink-wise. You can change those. You know, ink-wise, you might just want to turn into your tattoo skill. Raptor-wise, you might want to turn into knowledge nature. You might want to create a profession skill that you like. Time-wise, I would certainly put into spatial awareness, if nothing else, because it covers more things than just time. You know, party till dawn, you might want to turn into drinking. You know, so it's your carousing skill or whatever. But again, I don't really care. If you say, you know what, party till dawn, I'm taking that and I'm turning it into stealth. I'm going to go up 1 point in stealth forever. Then you could take these 3 points that you have in stealth and put them somewhere else. So anyway, it was an experiment that I tried and I didn't make very useful, so I wanted to trade it back to you for something that is useful. I think that is it. I will get this video posted, and I'll post some links to these documents for you guys. And if you have any questions, you can, of course, ask me. Thank you very much for watching.